Hi, I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of The Walking Dead, the Season 8 premiere titled Mercy. It's great to be back for Season 8, especially when things kick off with such a literally explosive episode. Seriously, did Michael Bay do this one? Because Daryl made enough booms to blow up an asteroid. Now here at New Rockstars, we like to dive deep into the super subtle, missable details of the visuals and the cultural influences. And yeah, we're trying out this new live-to-tape format to get these breakdowns to you faster. Don't worry, they'll still be obsessively detailed, but I no longer have the luxury of an editor to remove my awkward takes. That's right, I'm doing this all in one take, folks. Yeah! See, normally an editor would have removed that weird crap. Okay, let's get started with the big question that you guys were asking us about after this episode. Jorge tweeted us, is old Rick a dream, a jump in the future? And Brad tweeted us, seemed like we were seeing Rick at 3 or more separate points this season. Yes, what is the deal with old man Rick? And why is this episode jumping around in time? Well, allow me to try to explain. Yes, this entire episode is out of sequence, bordering on disorienting. The opening image is of a teary-eyed, mournful-looking Rick. Shortly after, we see shots of an older, bearded Rick. He walks with a cane, suggesting an injury he suffered from a past war with Negan. But the present timeline Rick is neither of those two. His story this episode begins at the graves of Glenn and Abraham in the hilltop, and he proceeds into his battle with Negan. But even then, that battle plan is something we dive right in the middle of. No expository planning scenes, no fashion montages where they all try on different color armbands corresponding to their communities. And the final scene of the episode jumps back into Rick's rousing speech, which seems to happen before the battle. So I think this timeline chaos is by design. This is meant to feel like the opening charge of a battle, something that is both meticulously synchronized and ultimately messy and disorienting. Throughout the episode, we get this tight close-up of watches and clocks, yet both instances, characters use those clocks for a countdown. Tara on the overpass, Rick outside the sanctuary giving them from a countdown from 10. They both end up saying, screw the timing. So that's the thematic reason behind the timeline stuff, but what are we literally seeing? I personally don't think those images of old man Rick are meant to be taken literally. Notice the soft dreamlike filter over these shots, also the bizarre song choice playing in the scene. A lot of you asked about that as well, and I'll have more thoughts on that, on how it all connects to the overall theory later on. So much of this episode for Rick focuses on the idea of tomorrow. Tomorrow is the word on Daryl's love note to Dwight. Tomorrow is what Maggie asks Rick about. So those images represent that idea of tomorrow for Rick, an ideal happy ending future that keeps him fighting. Now, I could be wrong, but I just don't think this season premiere would spoil all of these characters surviving this all-out war. To me, the more mysterious shot of Rick is this teary-eyed one. All we know about it is that he's sad, and he's standing under this interesting stained glass. He actually has a similar look of despair that he did in the opening shot of the Season 7 premiere right after Glenn and Abraham had died. So I interpret this as the opposite of Rick's heaven dream. It's some alternate hell future where this war goes very, very bad. Specifically, I think Rick is burying someone here. So I'm gonna get to some theories on who, but if you don't wanna know, skip to this time. That's right, I conjured this number live. Fear me. Okay, my first theory is based on what Rick says. May my mercy prevail over my wrath. This was spoken earlier by the new mysterious guy, a new Muslim character apparently named Abood, though he could be adapted from Siddiq in the comics. Now, I'm not sure if Rick was close enough to hear him say this mercy line. He said that he heard most of it, but maybe Rick will form a relationship with this guy and repeat these words during his burial. The second theory is Gabriel. Gabriel ended this episode with Negan, and it could kind of be fitting for Rick to use this verse from the Quran to eulogize a holy man of a different faith, huh? Third theory, Carl. Now, I know Carl seems like a lifetime character the show would never kill off, maybe just shoot his eyes out, but he definitely did hear that guy say that line, and his actions this episode show that he was influenced by those words, snapping at his father to have more mercy. And there was that one lookout savior that Rick killed who warned him that his family would die, but that leads me actually to my last theory, and I actually have a really strong morbid suspicion that this could be the case, Judith. A big part of the old Rick dream shots focused on his relationship with his daughter, who appeared older and perfect, angelic. And I think those were showing these butterfly kisses future that Rick wanted, the opposite of what's happening now. And FYI, Judith hadn't survived to this point in the comics, and toddler-age kids are really hard for a TV show to work with since they tend to noticeably age during the 6-month off seasons. And it would be horrible to see this happen on the show, but I could imagine them doing it to force Rick to pay a heavy emotional price in this all-out war. Okay, Speaking of the comics, I'm going to move on here to a segment where I compare the shots and events in this episode to the version in Robert Kirkman's source material. I call this super nerdy part, well, in the comics. Okay, so the events of this episode were adapted mostly from issues 115 and 116 from the Walking Dead comics. Carl left behind to defend Alexandria, and Andrea, whose arc has been adapted to Michonne on the show, offers to help Carl since now he's in charge. Also, we see Rick have a similar speech on the back of a truck. He fires a warning shot to get Negan's attention, though in this case they made this cool change so that they all fire together. Also, a lot of Negan and Rick's back and forth is kept the same, as well as Gregory's betrayal and Negan egging him on with the word "and" before kicking him off the platform. And the battle goes pretty much the same way too, with Rick's people shooting out the sanctuary windows and luring the walkers to box them in, though in the comics a truck just knocks down the fence instead of also exploding, because why not? Negan's final line of the episode, the hope you got your shitting pants on, is also something directly from the comics. And if those shots of old man Rick aren't a dream, if they're the actual future, some comic readers have suggested that this festival that they're prepping for could be a version of a major event from way later in the comics, which I won't get into, other than to say it involves a group called the Whisperers and something crazy happens. Okay, moving on. This episode was the 100th episode of The Walking Dead, which is a huge milestone for any TV show. And the writer said that they celebrated this partly by sneaking in a few callbacks to the very first episode of the series. Now I'm gonna run through these and all the connections to past episodes in a segment called Callbacks. Yeah, I know, it's a little on the nose. Okay, so first, another reason I'm thinking Old Man Rick is a dream vision, not literal reality, is that the shot of him waking up and looking over at the flowers is a direct callback to Rick waking up from the coma in the pilot, looking over at the dead, wilted flowers. I think all this imagery is meant to be a surreal opposite of Rick's reality. And this scene with Carl scavenging fuel is a recreation of another scene from the pilot. All the shots are mirrored, and this little girl walker that Rick sees in this scene echoes the one that he put down in that scene of the pilot. And maybe it's just me, but that house number behind Rick and Judith is 101, which was the episode number of the Walking Dead pilot. See, this is raw and unedited. I normally would have taken that out. Anyway, we also see Carol looking over at this flower drawing on the overpass. Now, I feel like this could be a callback to when she told Lizzie to look at the flowers in season 4 before she killed her. Carol's expression does faintly seem introspective and haunted here. I think my favorite callback is a line from Negan. Take a listen.
Ask you something, Rick.
This is great. Ask You Something is an inside joke among fans when they quote Shane, and over the summer, the writers promised that they would use Ask You Something as a line of dialogue in season 8. Didn't take too long, I guess. There was another callback from Jesus who joked that all I have at the hilltop are a bunch of books and an old lobster bib. We actually saw that bib hanging in the background of his place last season. Now, a lot of you asked why are they shooting out the windows of the sanctuary? This is actually a callback to season 5 when Rick brought up the broken window theory. That's the idea in policing where you can clean up a community by fixing the broken windows. It's a small detail that weirdly reflects society's broader stability. So by targeting the windows, Rick is trying to deliver the sanctuary community a symbolic destabilizing defeat. There's a similar callback when Rick takes it like a Polaroid picture. Damn, they really can't edit this crap out. Okay, so why does Rick do this? On a practical level, Rick could be taking a picture of the Saviors looking weak as proof to the other communities like the trash people, scavengers, or Oceanside that Negan is weak and it's time to join our cause. But it's also a callback to past seasons. When Negan bashes people's brains in, of course, the Saviors take a Polaroid as a kind of trophy. And in season 6, Glenn found all those photos, and when he got killed in season 7, a Savior took his photo. So Rick could be doing it here to get inside Negan's head. All right, let's move on. This episode also contains some interesting cultural influences that I want to talk about in our segment, Under the Influence. It's just getting better. As I mentioned before, the newcomer, Abood character, spoke the line, "May my mercy prevail over my wrath." He said his mother quoted the Quran, but before that he also said, "Whatever you have of good, spend on the traveler." That's another paraphrase from the Quran, chapter 2, verse 215. In the past, The Walking Dead has drawn on Christian symbolism and morality as a way to question the violent choices Rick has had to make. Characters like Gabriel and Glenn were used as surrogates of that spirituality. Now it appears that the show will be using peaceful messages from a different faith to temper Rick during this time of war. King Ezekiel uses a different influence to inspire his troops. He says, to quote the bard, "He today who sheds his blood with me shall be my brother." This is a line from Shakespeare's Henry V. This is another reminder of Ezekiel's past as a stage actor. Henry V was probably a play he performed in, and now he uses that theatricality to give this commanding presence. Now, if you zoom in and enhance on Rick's checklist, the name in the location in the corner is Pickett Field. Now, it could have been named after George Pickett, a Confederate major general during the Civil War. He was one of the guys who led Pickett's charge, the catastrophic Confederate advance at Gettysburg, where their troops were bombarded with artillery. Many historians consider this failed charge to have been the beginning of the end for the South of the Civil War. So we'll see if that history has any influence on Rick here. He's not exactly a Pickett figure. His charge this episode was super victorious, and I'm guessing he'll eventually come out on top of this all-out war. But perhaps Pickett's failure will haunt Rick in other ways, like the casualty of whomever he's burying in those shots. This episode was supposedly dedicated to George A. Romero, the godfather of the zombie genre. He was behind Night of the Dead and Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead. And there were a number of shots of walkers looming in the background of this episode that seemed to be homages to Romero's scaled-down horror aesthetic. Also, the group's tactic to cover the vehicles with sheet metal, which was in the comics, remember, could have been influenced by Zack Snyder's 2004 remake of Dawn of the Dead. Now, this episode also seemed to nod to the original Walking Dead Season 1 showrunner, Frank Darabont. There's a shot where Dwight snuffs out his cigarette, signaling Rick's snipers to take out the Savior lookouts. This is very similar to Darabont's shot in his movie The Shawshank Redemption, when the warden also puts out a cigarette to cue the guard up above to gun someone down. This episode also featured some interesting audio choices, so let's go over those in my segment, Hear that? Okay, let's start with this music that plays in Rick's future dream.
You turned off the alarm.
They can manage without you for one morning.
This is Weird Al's Another One Rides the Bus. It's a 1980 parody of Queen's Another One Bites the Dust. Weird Al tweeted that he was also confused by the show using this song. So what does it mean? Well, I think the idea of Another One Biting the Dust could be a clue that this is all Rick's escapist imagination from yet another person he loved dying or biting the dust. And the fact that this is a parody version of the song, to me, contributes to this falseness of these images. And maybe I'm stretching here, but maybe to ride the bus on the show could have a darker meaning. After all, at the end of season 6, the characters who rode the bus were the ones who ended up in Negan's death lineup. Stay off the bus, stay alive. So maybe Another One Rides the Bus is foreshadowing another character tragically ending up on the bloody end of Lucille. Okay, that's the best I got, Weird Al. Another audio choice I like came during this 30-second long take as we wait for the SUV to explode on the overpass. I love how the music contains this steady tick, turning this SUV into a literal time bomb. Okay, let's talk briefly about this episode's deeper meaning. It's titled Mercy, which is a word that we hear twice this episode when the Traveler and Rick say that spiritual verse, "May my mercy prevail over my wrath." This is a more profound version of a simpler lesson learned by Rick this episode, that this war isn't about him alone. He can't look at it like a solo campaign to avenge Glenn and Abraham. So even when he has an almost clear shot of Negan at the sanctuary, he decides to retreat with Gabriel, allowing mercy to momentarily prevail over his wrath so that he can stick to the plan and get his team a win. But also this decision signals a coming shift in Rick's worldview. Earlier, Carl snapped that firing over someone's head and hoping that they make it isn't enough. Remember, firing past someone to frighten them is exactly what Negan's men did to Rick at the end of season 6. So if Rick wants his new society to rise above that distrust and fear, he needs to show true mercy. Okay, let's take a look at the kill count this episode, combining human deaths and walker takedowns. Who was the deadliest? Now, it's a little hard to tell this episode. We saw lots of saviors getting gunned down and blown up, and from my count, Daryl tops the list. He killed 2 saviors and at least 1 walker, and I suppose we can give him credit for those other explosions that killed the other saviors and walkers. And let's not forget Dwight's tire. R.I.P. This episode actually kind of foreshadows Daryl's high numbers. This shot of him taking out this one savior is hilarious. He yanks him off screen, and within seconds he comes back into the frame with both the guy's gun and his cigarette. This gun had 43 hash marks on it, probably the number of kills that guy had, and you just know Daryl's like, you know what, I could probably top that. Okay, finally let's make some predictions for next week's episode titled The Damned. The sneak peek released by AMC shows Morgan and the others scoping out the Savior satellite outpost, the site of Rick's first major bloody victory over the Saviors in season 6. And I don't know, guys, I don't feel good about this. After the initial victory, I think Rick and his forces are due for a setback. perhaps as karma for murdering the saviors in their sleep in season 6. Maybe that's why this episode is called The Damned. And I don't know if you caught this, but in the opening credits, the image used for Alana Masterson, Tara's title slide, is this station. So I predict something big is about to go down for her. Who do you think Rick is mourning in those teary-eyed shots? Is he mourning anyone at all? And do you think Old Man Rick could be a literal future? I want to hear from you in the comments below. And another way you can reach out to us is on Stardust. We actually started a weekly panel show called The Need to Know, where we feature viewers' video reactions on the Stardust app. I actually posted my reaction to this episode with an additional detail I noticed. You can download Stardust by clicking on our download link in the description below. Like and share this video and subscribe to New Rockstars for more analysis of The Walking Dead and other shows and movies that you love. And if you really like us, you can contribute to us on Patreon. Big thanks to all of our donors, especially Pony Stark. Tweet me at Erik Voss with any thoughts or theories you have, or follow New Rockstars on Twitter at New Rockstars for updates on our videos. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.